Hey everyone, welcome to another K6 office hours, and I am Nicole van der Hoeven.
And I'm Simme, and today we have Nočnica from New Relic with us. Hi, welcome.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me. So I'm Nočnica. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you tell us about yourself?
Oh, well, so I'm Nočnica. I specialize... hold on one sec. That's not important. I'm Nočnica. I specialize in serverless and other cloud engineering monitoring for New Relic. And my connection to K6 is I actually saw a demo from, I believe one of our engineers was
Gary,
on,
right?
I'm sorry, who?
Gary Spencer?
Yeah. He came on my show, which is the Nerd Log on Twitch, and said, he had this great demonstration, and I got all excited. Now, in the intervening 12 weeks, have I actually installed and run K6? Not quite. That's what we're going to do today. But I really saw the power of being able to send a sort of controlled load test and be able to really clearly observe the results. And the level of control that were offered by K6 seems really, really neat. We have, like a lot of big orgs, we have our own like internal version of this that we built to do like testing and demonstration. But it's extremely, like, if K6 had been around at the time, we wouldn't have used it, right? Like, it's extremely reedy and only works in a controlled environment where we're saying, hey, we get to configure the network and what have you to make this work, right? Because it's for demonstration purposes. But as far as actual like testing and production, we're not able to do that. So what I'd love to do today is build something to test my colleague Daniel's new events page that he set up last night, and we'll see how it does.
Sounds excellent.
Sounds great.
What else? Yeah, so that's the goal. So the thing that's very exciting that I get to talk about starting today is that we're doing a new version of Serverless Days. We're doing Serverless Days Student Edition, and so for that, we set up an events page, and so I want to test it out a little bit. And I can get that.
Wow, straight to business. That's
right
awesome.
to business, yeah.
Yeah, we don't get too many people who are like, "Oh, please let me code live." That doesn't really happen.
Well, that's that I genuinely feel like it's my job as a developer all the time. It's my job to be like a professional idiot. It's my job to be a fool, because then everyone who sees it, they don't feel so bad, right? Because I am the worst extemporaneous coder. So people get to see me make mistakes and say, console.lurg and have stuff fail to compile over and over and over again. So that's the hope. Anyway,
it's so fun that you mentioned that, because Nicole and I usually talk about the nervousness of doing live presentations and things like that. And you've been asking me a couple of times why I'm not nervous when I'm presenting, and I usually reply to you that because I'm too dumb to be nervous. And it sounds like we're on the same track in that regard.
I have kind of I don't do a ton of live coding on my own anymore, right? Lately I've been doing this like nerd log stuff where I have other people on and coding. But for sure, my catchphrase when I'm doing that is, like, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if this just worked? Like, hey, let's go write this. Let's see if it. I mean, anytime something runs the first time, I'm like, well, what happened? When we investigate this, that's much more expected than working through a few errors. So
let
me start sharing my screen.
So this actually worked. So I'm pretty sure something is wrong. We need to go back and look at this.
Exactly.
Immediate reaction.
So here is Serverless Days Student Edition. Oh man. Oh, Daniel got all this stuff up.
Oh, it looks great.
If y'all are watching this after the fact, well, I don't have the URL, like, we don't have it hooked up as like student.serverless days quite yet, so we'll get there in the next couple days, and maybe I'll put that in as a Hold on one sec. Maybe I'll put that in as a comment on the YouTube when we do the stored version of it.
Yeah.
Sure, I can also edit it and put it in the description when you do that.
I'll be sure to send an audio file
days?
so that we can drop it in later. So it's like, just go to serverlessdays.io.
Yeah.
When it's ready. Just one second, I'm going to answer a work thing.
And if you're not already
heard of the serverless days.
If you're not already signed up for the Serverless Days Student Edition, or if you haven't been to a serverless event before, you really should go, because it's usually really, really good. I spoke at the Stockholm edition a couple of years ago, and that was like so many bright people sharing their ideas around serverless. So
yeah, it's a fun series, and Student Edition is going to be fun. It's going to be focused on people who are starting out in serverless. So it's going to have presentations by like boot campers and high schoolers and stuff, which I think is very exciting. But it's also just going to be, hey, if you're a Java developer or something and you want to get into serverless, you haven't done it yet, it's just going to be, everything is going to be for that, beginner level in the like serverless area. So
maybe a tester?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you have to fill out the CFP. You have to come and talk because.
Oh, I was going to come in
doing it. So right now we have 2 speakers booked out of and we're like, because we have the technological capacity, like, oh, we'll do 3 tracks. I'm just like, where are we? How? Okay, it'll be fine. August 15th. August 15th, everybody. Mark your calendars. Fill out the CFP shortly. Okay, so running K6. All right. Let's figure it out. Just to make it
clear, I wasn't actually angling to talk there. I was angling to like sign up and watch because I am a beginner at serverless for sure.
Oh yeah, you should come and talk about running K6 though. Like that's when I'm trying to explain like why we do serverless, more clearly, why we like might learn serverless as like a boot camper. My explanation is basically, why would you do like tickets and like Agile as a boot camper? Why would you even learn like GitHub as a boot camper, right? Like when you're working on your own code, you could do backups a bunch of ways. You don't need commits and public repositories and all that stuff, right? We do it because it will be useful to us later. And so the big example of that is actually that we almost everybody does learn is testing, right? Like I think most people learn GitHub and commits for sure as a boot camper. They learn, and maybe you learn some kind of like documentation of work, right? Some kind of like agile methodology or something, but not really, right? But testing is another one that people should learn. And anytime you sit down and talk with like boot camp instructors, like, yeah, we should teach testing of some kind. But I love the idea that we can actually make like an accessible like load testing that feels so good. So how do we do this though? How do we do this? Okay. Let's get set up. Okay, installation.
This is great though. So like if there's something that isn't obvious to you or that you can't figure out, that's like a clue for us to make sure our documentation is better.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. We'll do it with Brew. That should be fine. My terminal's probably set up and working. For like 3 months, my terminal would start up and be like, "Hey, you like your bash RC does not like parse correctly." I couldn't figure it out. Oh, that was a rough one. That was a rough time. Okay, so brew install K6. Yeah, I can do that.
So will this actually be the first time you're trying out K6?
I haven't done this before.
Oh, cool.
This is great.
Zoom in and
I really appreciate how brave you are.
I hope Gary is here watching now as well. Since he's written the documentation for this, or parts of it.
So
not the installation though, right?
No, not the installation.
Next, we're running as a script, and we're gonna do it from a.
It should already be finished if you.
Oh yeah,
it's still updating.
This is the thing. Like, if you really haven't done it at all, then it's like, oh, you have to update Homebrew from the version from 1996 that came with your disk image or whatever.
So I joined K6 like 6 months ago now, and for my first week, I actually did like a video every day as I was learning how to use K6. So that I think that's the closest that I've gotten to live coding. It wasn't really live. I pre-recorded it, just so I can edit out the really embarrassing parts.
Yeah, really, boy, we're really waiting on updating Homebrew. Like, hey, console log out some stuff, Homebrew. Like, talk to me a little bit. All right, I'll give you 1 second.
Yeah.
I just want to make a quick plug here for the Bit Project, which is Bit Project is really kind of that's nice. Where Serverless Day Student Edition like grew out of. And the thing I want to talk about with the Bit Project, and the thing that occurs to me because it's for what we're going through here, we're still updating Homebrew. Oh no, okay, it really was doing something. All right, is the Bit Project's like basic like path of work is to let me see if I can get this open on another screen. It's like a semi-automated bootcamp process. So it's initially targeted, of course, for like new coders. But when I first got to look at it, it has the system whereby you clone whatever lesson into your own GitHub. You make commits to like fill out like assignment 1, and then it automatically tests and replies to your commits to like, as if you have a senior dev who's like examining your stuff and being like, okay, now do this next step, or like, hey, this isn't valid for the following reasons. It's really neat. I want to.
That's cool.
See if I can show it working.
I see Simme put it in the chat so that people can see what we're talking about as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's the first of the things I've shown that actually has a working URL currently. So good. So if you take a look here, and let me zoom in and enhance a little bit on this. Oh, full screen, please. So you start out and it will have an issue on there automatically, and then it says, hey, do these following steps and these tasks, and then as you commit with the stuff that satisfies that test, it'll make a new issue or make a new comment on that first issue to say, hey, here's the next step, and it will actually go through and like test your JS and stuff. It's a really, really neat way to. So I love seeing it work for students. That's really cool, and we're going to be doing a cadre in the summer. But the thing I want to expand that into is like, if a student can get like a product working this way, I want to see it work for everybody that way. So like, it puts in my mind like the Sonic Pi project where this guy Sam Aaron was like, I was trying to make like music software and like coding like beats and music and stuff live. And he said, and then I made a children's edition. Like I had this one, it was for musicians, and then I made a version that was for children. And that's Sonic Pi. And like his first version, no one uses. And the children's edition does like all of that, but just in a more accessible way, a much, much more accessible way. And it's the thing that like you can now go see live on stage like any weekend. Because so I just really like the idea of like, hey, if I can get a student or a new coder through like, here's how you implement Postman, or here's how you implement Twilio or something in one of these interactive lessons, that means I can get anybody through it in an interactive way. So that's what I'm looking to like expand the Bit project out into soon. Okay, so it's installed, which means that we should have this CLI, right? Okay, running K6. So
Yay!
Oh,
and you can probably run K6 version just to make sure you got the latest version, and you should have, right?
Yeah. Oh wait. Why didn't? Oh, verbose.
Yeah, and without the slash as well, unfortunately. Dash. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Fine. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Nice. Okay, so now running K6. All right. So we write JavaScript. So we write JavaScript for this thing. I was working on some serverless thing or something here. All right, that's fine. New file. Nope, no, not well. Sure, fine. Folder. Fine. In there. New file. Test1.js. Okay. All right. Save that. And the command was K6 run script. K6 run.
Oh, it's just K6 run and then test1.js.
Oh, right. See, yeah, I put in the word script because that was the file name in the example.
That's all right.
Hey,
there we go.
Hey, cool as shit. I like it. I'm like gonna go insane with power, start testing a bunch of other stuff, and get myself test a bunch of things that are not mine, and then get myself to federal prison. How about that? So let's test something that is mine. So let's just modify it. So we sleep one. Okay, let's not get that, but get my thing. Which I used to have open. Let me go open the message that had that.
I think it's in the gray window in the background, right?
Probably. I actively made fun of someone on my live stream yesterday for having a lot of tabs open. And I, as somebody who like works side contracts or works for nonprofits or stuff along with my day job, I have so many Chrome users. It's up to 15 now. And like some of them I need to prune out, but like it's like which
15?
Persona? Yeah, it's not good. Okay.
I have 2 and have problem juggling those.
Same. I have 2. Do you use Magnet, by the way? Totally unrelated to K6.
I don't
but
know
it's like it snaps your tabs to like the half of the screen or a quarter of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
I use this window tidy to do this with any window. But yeah, otherwise I don't use any kind of like tab grouping or anything. That was the thing I was talking about, is that like Firefox or somebody was like, hey, come do tab grouping. And I was like, that's like someone telling me to take all of the dirty laundry in my room and like shove it into one pile. Like that's not, that doesn't make me feel better.
Yeah.
I just need to close these tabs. Okay,
That's
so
true.
I'm sure that this is covered in the docs. Well, okay, let's just run this test again because now I'm pointing it at my own. Did I save? Save. I did save. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this thing. Let's see what I'm going to say. Okay, one complete and zero interrupted.
If you zoom out one step, you should get the correct
formatting,
positioning of the.
Oh, I see. My
like,
did I like break my line breaking here or something? I mean, this seems fine.
Almost.
I'm not complaining. I mean, yes, like this would be more accurate to what I would actually see, right? Is like nice like this, but
yes,
I'll figure it out. I'm good. I want people to be able to read this if they're watching the stream, so I'll live with it. Okay, so let's see if I can understand this. K6, cool. Execution local script test.1 out. There's no output. One scenario. One max VUs. Virtual users.
Yes.
Max duration.
So we express it in terms of virtual users because that's kind of like easy for people to understand that you're trying to simulate one real user.
Yeah.
Except this one's virtual.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, so and then there's a bunch of stuff that I'm a JavaScript developer. It's not my job to understand how networks work. So things like TLS and shaking, I'm like, okay, I'm sure that's important.
So there's like a lot of information that, and a lot of them probably you don't really need them. I think the most important one here is the HTTP rec duration line.
Yeah,
because that's what people would commonly refer to as the response time. That's a closest one, I think, to a response time.
Yeah, and I mean
the others are just like different components of that response time if you're trying to go for something more specific.
Yeah, and I mean as as far as loading a static page, right, and just seeing what its response time is, coming from the New Relic side, right, it's like you're going to start with, hey, what's this overall time, right? Maybe some other questions like, hey, is it really heavy? Like, do we have a bunch of data sent and received or something else that looks odd? And then after that, we're going to want this information for, okay, if we have a problem, where might it be, right?
For sure.
I actually have to go use the restroom, so I will be back in just a minute, folks. I'm not going to close
Sure,
it.
no
I'm
problem.
going to leave my camera on just in case we don't break like video layout stuff. So I'll be right back.
It's all right. That's why we use StreamYard, so it doesn't get broken.
And while we take a break, I'll
just mute her for now.
I just wanted to point out that while HTTP duration is probably the most important thing in this screen, I'd say that HTTP rec failed is also a quite nice metric to look at from the get-go, because that will kind of indicate instantly if something is wrong rather than if it's just slow. So that could be good to look at as well.
One thing, though, to keep in mind is that HTTP rec failed by default is going to mark HTTP 400 to 500 requests as a failure. So if you're specifically trying to get one of those, then you might be surprised that it's marked as failed, but maybe it's not. But that behavior you can change, but just wanted to call out the default one.
Yep. And also, while we're waiting, I just want to make a quick mention that we still have a lot of different job openings over at our homepage. So if you're looking to work with K6 or would like to be part of the team in some way, go to k6.io/jobs and have a look at our current openings and see whether something might fit you. And if it does, get in touch or just apply through the links, and we'll make sure to set you up.
Nica is back. Hang on, I need to unmute her, I think.
Oh,
unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Sorry about that.
No, it's good. I could have ended up swearing at my cat for 10 minutes. I appreciate being muted. Didn't even occur to me. Okay. So what would I actually want to do next with K6? The next thing I'd want to do is I'd want to more than one virtual user run views 10. Oh, so you don't like script how many virtual users you are. You pass it as a
if you want to.
Duration 30 seconds. So we say duration 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds between each virtual user, or that's
a total. So the virtual users will try to execute as many requests as they're able during that duration. Okay. But you don't have to pass it as a CLI parameters either. You can actually set them in the script as well. So it's up to you which one you prefer, basically.
Well, let's try this though. Okay, so more K6 run -- views 10 -- duration. This is pretty nice flagging. 30
duration
seconds.
is misspelled.
Yeah, that makes sense. See, that's why you zoom in. That's why you zoom with text. Because otherwise, how chat tell you like, oh, you misspelled duration for the 4th time. 30 seconds. And then I actually call mine test1.js. Okay.
There you go. So I think that the flag is really handy in case you maybe want to run a script at different levels, like you want to run a shakeout and then you want to run a load. That way you don't have to actually go into the script to change anything. But you can if you want.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, because it's very likely if you're going to be running this stuff on your own that you're actually going to be running it in multiple environments. So, I mean, sure, if you're a boot camper, great. This is, solid, scripted in, however you want to do it. But I think that it's very likely that you're going to be saying, hey, I want to test development, or I want to test staging or something. And you're not going to want to go in and edit your scripts, which hopefully have all these like sophisticated user behaviors or whatever else, just to say, oh, I'm running it in test in prod now, so I want to edit that. It's much better to just be editing the flags, right?
Yeah, that would work for the most of the situations. But if you really try to create a complex script where you maybe want different scenarios running at the same time and things like that, then you would probably have to script it though, because then you might want 10 virtual users from Oregon at the same time as you have 100 users from Japan, and you want those to like simultaneously access your page. But that's really an advanced use case. For most use cases, you will probably get by with using the CLI flags.
Why don't we test your or are we already testing your site? Sorry.
Yeah, we're hitting my site. So let's look at this feedback. So let me try to read this stuff now that I've set more than one person to do it. Okay. So 10 looping views for 30 seconds. Grace will stop 30 seconds. Presumably, Grace will stop means what? Like, Grace will stop means it actually.
It's just so that it doesn't stop like all at once. It's like it's going to finish what it's doing.
Yeah. So it's important if you have like a single page app or something that you don't have a bunch of users who just suddenly disconnected midway through their sessions. Cool. Okay, so data received 10 minutes, 2 kilobytes. Used 20 minutes. Now I wonder. I think if I had like the caching written a little better, we wouldn't necessarily see quite this amount of data send, right? Well, I guess you're sending multiple users, so it should show up like, because this is like way more than 10 times what I got before. So like last time I received only 39 kilobytes. So like it looks like there's, well, I guess even if I'm getting it from the caching layer, it's still going to show up here. Okay, got it. Sorry, I was just having to think through like what it meant.
No, this is good.
Okay, so now we're getting averages. Did we get averages before? We got averages before, even though we only had one, but that's fine. And then iterations 280. Okay, really glad I didn't just point this thing at CIA.gov. It's possible. It's like y'all remember we got if you're kind of from back in the day, and you remember Loic or anything on the YouTube chat, don't do it, folks. Do not hearing our guest, do we not remember Loic? Loic?
No.
This is like first days of Anonymous. This like 4chan group was like, oh yeah, you should help. Help DDoS this site. Just go and download the software, which had like absolutely no security written into it. And this one like college kid ended up getting like a federal charge off of it. Just for like, oh yeah, let me see what the software does, and then like, okay, I'll go ahead and run it. And it was like he'd used federal property to attack other federal property, and it ended up like catching a felony with no jail time off of it. Yeah, that's rough. Okay, so views min 10, max 10, request connecting. Okay, I'm seeing good stuff. So now what I want to do is I want to make this thing get views duration. Okay, yeah, so here we are putting in the script, but stages. You also be a little
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Maybe we should add a check. So let's look at something that's returned in the response of your page, just to make sure that we are actually hitting it.
So so like here would be like the most basic of like checker stuff would be like, hey, does like, I mean it's sort of asinine that these days to say like, does something in the footer load, but let's say like, does the word conference show up? Sure. And that's just to check that we're not getting the page is loading, it's giving us a 200, but then the entire text of the page is database error or something, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's not what's happening. So let's add a check. Ramping up, ramping down views, running cloud tests. Very cool. But yeah, so checks.
You can probably,
All right.
This is actually really handy, seeing someone navigate through this.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty good so far. Like, left-hand toolbar actually has things that I would be kind of thinking of. I mean, I guess it might be fair to say, you said checks, right? So maybe I don't know. I think I would have figured out checks. I think I would have figured that out pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
So check. All right. So let's take out the sleep. Macbeth hath murdered sleep. Let's give it a try.
Out jam spot.
let's not run. Let's see if that runs. Yeah. Okay. Error. Reference res is not defined. Oops. My copy pasting has gone a little too far. Let res.
I mean, this is reality, right? This happens all the time.
We do it probably.
I don't know if we want to remove the sleep though. Then you'll probably get even more iterations.
Why? So in this case, I'm running it without as a single request. So then it would just be one request. But yeah, if I took out the sleep, that would affect me if I said, "Hey, run multiple views for this amount of time," right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So,
and also, if you don't have a sleep in your script, it's like it makes it less realistic, because a real user would pause. There is a normal pause, and it would just like be hammering the application. So you might get a response time that's not really indicative of real world use.
I personally love testing without sleeps. I do that all the time. But as Nicole says, it's usually not as realistic, right?
It's like it eats up the resources on your load generator, especially if you're just testing on your machine. And then like if your CPU or memory is maxed out just from hammering it, then like you can't. I don't know. I don't trust the results of the test.
You're going to start to get routing problems, and then you might even find like your ISP starts shutting you down just for sending so many like identical DNS requests or something. It's just not accurate to what you might get. So by the way, if anyone was keeping track of the many errors that I've made in coding, I thought I was back in Ruby land and that I could just do sleep space 1 without the parentheses, but I got there eventually.
You did. I'm so impressed that you're doing this. This is great.
Stuff live. Didn't like that.
I shouldn't say. Okay.
No. Well, first of all, don't tell me what's wrong. Let me figure that out for a sec. Check is not defined. Check is not defined. Reference error. Check is not defined. Okay, let's go back to what I was doing. Check is not defined. Okay, wait. So let's go back to just running this once. Oh, wait. Okay, no. Check is not defined because I had to import check. Yeah, I did import check. Okay. That's fine. So yeah, so you running locally, I guess you can, Control C out of stuff, which is good to know. Import sleep. Check. No, I'm not going to combine them up because that is for weird. So now, did I run that with text? No, okay. Now we're no longer failing. Okay, good. Is status 200. Now we're working. So if I hammer the thing, we're also happy with that. Okay, cool. I'm assuming that's going to work out after 30 seconds. So body size is 117 bytes. Boy, I don't want to do that one. Checks the CI setting. Nope. Checks TSS cloud results. So I just want to say body contains. Well, it's probably going to be in here. Let's see.
We should definitely have that.
I don't think it is in there, to be honest.
I need to add that.
Because or what you would usually do in this case is that the response object contains a body, right? And the body is of type string. So then you can use JavaScript's built-in contains function to check it. So maybe we should add that into the docs though, because that might not be obvious.
Yeah, I think it would be good to add just an example code of that. So yeah, I see what you're saying, that this thing here, a check takes in a HTTP return and then runs this function, which is going to evaluate out to key being the test name, value being a Boolean. So yeah, so if you return some other Boolean, you can do checks in the JavaScript. Yeah, it'd be great to see sample code of that, because I sure as shit am not going to do that live. Is try to evaluate the regex within JavaScript, but that's fine. Well, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, we can try some of this other stuff. I'm not going to, because totally make sense to like weigh your response.
I can send it to you.
Yeah. I always think of this.
Actually, I'll just send it in the public chat.
This
so
when you look at like
see it too.
The body length. Oh. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. That's actually that's pretty good. Okay. So I had that not quite right. It was that this thing accepts the key is the name of the test and the value is a function that returns a Boolean actually. So include stuff here. So includes, I don't remember how, well, I guess includes will take a simple string. I wonder if it'll take a pattern. I'll go look that up in a sec. Let's run that single E.
Is that how you do it too, Simme? Do you also use includes or?
Yeah, includes or do an inline regex, I guess, but that definitely works.
Bloopers?
Well, we got to see it fail, right? Yeah, perfect.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, so I think includes will accept a pattern. I'm going to go find out.
It does.
Okay. Fine.
Sorry. It was great that way.
I can't help myself. Sorry, I'm gonna just watch.
So yeah, I mean, we can check for more stuff, but this is very solid. So r.body, r.status. Okay, cool. R we accept in R, which is always going to be the result, which we call it with result. What is this thing look like? Probably should do like console.bdug, whatever. Yeah, it's just do console, whatever. So it comes in as this big object. I'm not going to evaluate all the way through it, but that's neat. I didn't realize we could like work on that.
Well, you can also pass as a flag HTTP debug if you want to see what it returns.
I'm just going to do it this way because I want to see what it gives it as a string. Yeah, cool. Oh, really neat. Yeah. K6, I kind of going to go deeper on this layer. This is neat stuff. So,
what do you think so far?
It's, I mean, it's as described. Like the demo on the Nerdlog covered it pretty well, and the documentation works good. Like this is a good setup. I think one is about to hit a really. You can put it right under testing guides. That's right where I looked at it. I don't know if you roll the video back, you'll see me doing this. I'm like, okay, test types. I looked there, and then I looked here at like, okay, testing guides, and so this would be the point to put like evaluating the body. You're like. Yeah, like checking for body stuff. So the necklace clasp that I made out of hair ties wasn't as long lasting as I'd hoped.
Aww.
Yeah, right. There we go. I'll just go put it back. Okay, so I guess I think my mind is going to like synthetic stuff after this. That's more kind of into the New Relic side, which is like less like trying to do a load test, which by the way, like there is nothing competing or even similar from New Relic, which makes sense because this is a very different, the purpose of this is very different. This is observability when you know it's happening, right? So I define observability as just any attempt to understand how your system works faster. So like very low observability events are like when there's a breakdown in the system and you just restart the server and you don't know why that works, but it does. And then I don't know if y'all have seen this, but I've certainly interacted with organizations where that just became standard, where it was just like, yeah, Thursday nights we restart the server because if it keeps running until Friday, it hits problems and we don't know why. That's the real garbage collection, right?
Being there.
I think it makes so much sense too that you're all into serverless, and I think observability is both more important and more difficult to achieve in serverless architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the really interesting things is that, as we move to this cloud engineering stuff, a lot of the problems that we used to have just simply aren't like reasonable problems. So like, when we're totally bought into like serverless compute and serverless databases, issues like sharding or like low-level scaling issues, right, really should be absent, right? We don't say, hey, how do we add another 10,000 users to our like DynamoDB instance? Like we're generally like, oh, that's just going to work just fine, right? But some problems remain. Observability is one of them, and observability is one of the ones that does actually get worse, right? And part of it is, we had such a beautiful experience here. We're about to move on to the cloud version of K6, right? Where we're sending it up to the K6 service and automating this and also doing much more ambitious stuff. Presumably we're using like multiple geos and all this other cool stuff. That's supposed to be the path, right? Our path for development is we work locally and then we use a cloud version afterwards. Well, that does not work with serverless, right? There is not a good local emulation for serverless. And in fact, just last week, we were chasing down this issue in our service, and we finally realized, oh, this person is trying to run their serverless function locally. And ours, New Relic's, like many other things, doesn't actually work in that environment, right? And even to say it is a bit nonsensical. In the AWS serverless world, you say, okay, I want to run my AWS Lambda locally, okay? Well, my first question is, what does it do then? Where does it get an event from? Okay, well, I guess it turns out you like very carefully code up an event for it to receive, right? And then, okay, you're running it locally. All right, so what is the purpose of this function? Well, presumably, I mean, if it's the most basic of functions, it's probably going to go look at a database and give you some results, right? Well, okay, what's our local version of an AWS DynamoDB instance, right? How do you can't write migrations for them, so how do you even make it an emulated version, right? And so even the simple idea of, hey, I have a local copy of this, right, it doesn't work. So you are in the situation of pushing up code changes that you do not have as good a local understanding of how they work and if they work, right? And then you get into this thing of atomization, right, where you say, hey, I can empower my teams to roll out little microservices. The most common feature that we see requested that we're sort of working on adding for serverless is like service mapping. But it's a little surprising, right? When someone says, when we start to drill in with like, what do you want from service mapping? They're just like, what's calling what in our structure?
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine being in a situation 5 years ago where half the people you talk to who run big services, or not even big, medium-sized, right? Like, oh, we sell auto parts to North Carolina, right? Like, like not a huge business. We don't know which servers are talking to which other servers, right? Yeah. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, that was the sort of thing that you like laughed about, like what a messed up team, right? Now that's just the norm, right? What's relying on what's going to go down when we take the service down is surprising, right? And that makes sense because you have 10 times the number of microservices. So yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable situation, but it's still like observability becomes more of a challenge.
Can we take a step back and talk about the difference between, like, what is new about serverless compared to the traditional way?
So what serverless is a version of sort of the containerization movement, right? Where it's the most extreme version of, hey, you're going to package your stuff up. It's going to be in this predictable format that's going to run in a predictable way. So someone said, hey, I can run your containers for you. And even better than that, you don't have to worry about scaling them at all because I will instance a new container every single time you have a request. And if you get 10,000 requests in the next minute, I will just make 10,000 instances of that container. Cool. But to do that, you have some limitations that are not like left to the platform person, but pushed back onto you. So the big one is statelessness, that you have to say, hey, I can't have any kind of state when I load because I don't know if I'm going to be loading one of these or 10,000 of these. I don't know how often I'm going to spin them down or spin them up. So there can be no state. There's no file saving anywhere. You have to use like a database or some other tool to even do any kind of simple iteration. So serverless is saying, hey, just give me a short blob preferably a short blob of code that I'll run every single time I receive requests. So this is generally why they're called like serverless functions, because you don't need to have any code of like, hey, stand up a server, wait for requests, and respond to the request like this. They're going to be implicitly like, hey, I'll receive an event, and then I'll emit some kind of response, and then I'll shut down. And so that's very good for really smooth scaling. And, you know, when sort of people first heard about it, they thought, oh, this is like this really expensive way to, you know, always be able to have scale. Is that, you know, you at great expense, you will stand up new containers whenever you need them. That's sort of, that one hasn't really come to pass. Like serverless remains like a relatively cheap way to run your code. It just requires a little shift in thinking. So serverless is still kind of in its infancy, like in the industry. In general, when you go talk to, you know, anybody kind of enterprise level who's doing big, you know, IT operations, serverless is either here or it's going to be here, right? It's like, oh, we're moving over to serverless. Sometimes it's, oh, we're buying it completely and like all of our virtual machines are going away and we're going to switch to serverless. Or it's, hey, we have a whole team and they're doing serverless stuff and that's very major for us. The most extreme sort of people who are updated by serverless is the people who were maintaining some kind of mainframe or other server system to do occasional jobs that were really important. And so for them, they're, you know, like that's where you get the stories of, hey, this thing cost us, you know, $5,000 a month and it went down to costing $5 a month because we just paid for when it was running. And then more quietly is situations where, you know, nothing had to happen. There was no event to scale up to handle a big spike in traffic. So that's applicable especially to like, you know, people who sell lunch, people who do lunch delivery. You know, serverless is a major thing because it scales up smoothly to handle your 11 a.m. spike in traffic. But yeah, so that's serverless. Serverless is closely associated with serverless compute, like AWS Lambda or Azure Functions. It actually, you know, sort of as a model where you're handing off a bunch of your concerns about platform to a vendor. Serverless has existed for a long time. Serverless is what Amazon S3 is, right? You don't stand up a storage server, right? You don't configure its firewall, you don't configure its port configuration, or even you write no code to say, here's how you're going to handle and respond to requests. You just say, hey, make a new instance of this, and here are the files, and here's your config, and that's it. So serverless has been around for a concept as a while. Yeah, what else do I want to say about serverless? That's it. But yeah, serverless compute is the thing that is growing really quickly.
So the way that I think of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding of it, is that the traditional way is like, let's say that I receive a piece of paper and I need to get Simme to stamp it. So I'd get that piece of paper, walk over to his desk and be like, hey, can you stamp this? He takes out his little stamp, stamps it, gives it back to me, and then I return with it to my desk. And then I think that like event-driven architecture would be, I get a piece of paper and I say, hey, Simme, anytime that I put anything on this desk, just feel free to go and stamp it. And then I put it on the desk and he's like every now and then having a look and he grabs it and does it. And it happens without me saying directly, hey, Simme, there's something here. You know, like he just knows where it is. Is that sort of right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good explanation. It's funny because I have always event-based is sort of where I started. So like request-based, which is the alternative, I'm like, right, I sort of understand how that works. Yeah, I always just mean like, you know, you get past something. I think the other thing that's happening is that, you know, your example is very good. There's no single thing that's like that piece of paper is like session. Right? It's just that, you know, the piece of paper comes in, it gets passed around, and then maybe some result gets passed out or not. But there's no like connection session that's happening, right? So in one way to think about it is that in a sort of traditional model, there would be a person who's walking around with that piece of paper who's saying like, hey, I want to do this and I want to do this, and it has these side effects. Instead, that person is just sort of feeding the paper through a slot and waiting to see some result come out someplace else. So yeah, I mean, I think that's one way to think about it. We used to have this sort of concept of like a user session that was happening. And that's still quite applicable if you're streaming data to the user. where you do really want to be quite thoughtful about, hey, the user's still here, and we're continuing to emit stuff back to the user kind of constantly. But for, web requests and other kind of standard, connection and file operations, it makes more sense to say, hey, this is just an event that's being emitted, and we'll set up triggers that just whenever a piece of paper comes across my desk, I'll do exactly this predictably. And it is that event-based thing that is causing, like, event-based has a lot of advantages as an architecture at first, but then it also causes observability problems, because previously it was pretty easy to say, what is this user's total session information, right? Like, where did this request go? Where was it passed to? It's part of one long sort of session. But now when maybe something is emitting multiple events and they're being passed back and forth in complex ways, that's a more robust architecture, but it's harder to understand and map. So how does this apply over to like load testing? It's actually pretty clear that what we want to see when we do load testing, and especially complex load testing, is we want to be able to get a sense of where all requests are getting passed. And so it would be quite interesting to use K6 to emit like multiple types of events pretty quickly and see how like our auto scaling is doing. Oh, and that's the other big connection, right? Is that we expect all these serverless components to scale very smoothly. But, the sort of big bugaboo of serverless compute has been a concept called cold starts, where it's not quite so smooth as we expect. Now, I'll say that cold starts are very much sort of a boogeyman of the architecture. And the whole point of serverless is, in some ways, we want to be handing off these concerns to our vendor. So a concern about cold starts is essentially us trying to like think of problems that might happen and then worry about them and then try to solve for them. When if we're doing that a lot, we're probably not really using serverless like correctly. So like you would see these things where they're like, oh, I don't want my function to shut down, so I'll go and engineer something that automatically pings my function every 30 seconds forever. And like, that's nuts. Like, don't do that. Don't do stuff like that. Like,
you lose all the benefit, right? Because that's the whole thing, to keep the functions or the serverless containers ephemeral. And if you go and say like, okay, I want these ephemeral containers, but I don't want them to be ephemeral anymore, then you could have as well just spun up a Docker container or a Kubernetes pod instead, because you don't want serverless in that case.
And further, like, it's also, one, you're going to lose the benefit of like, hey, don't pay for it when you're not using it. You're also, it's not going to work because, just because you send a request every 30 seconds, it's just going to keep one execution environment live. So when you get 5 requests simultaneously, which is where like load testing becomes very critical, when you're getting 5 requests simultaneously, it's still going to need to spin up 4 other execution environments. Now, there is some engineering that is your responsibility, shared responsibility with any of these cloud systems. So it's really important to do load testing to look at it from high level. So a really good example of that is, while you shouldn't be engineering your own pingers or trying to like mess with the system to make it work better for you, AWS will readily tell you, like, don't have slow starting Lambdas calling other Lambdas. So if you have like a Java Lambda, which more power to you, it takes a little longer to load up than like a Node one or a Go Lambda that starts extremely, extremely fast. So that's okay. And cold starts aren't that much of an issue. But what if you have one Lambda calling several others in a chain? So now your scale up requests, so you're not just your first request after a long time of quiet, but your 10th request when you're suddenly spiking in traffic can start to respond very, very slowly. So that's where like load testing is pretty key. And in fact, it might be a good reason not to use sleep, right? Is to say, hey, let's try and pass these all together as much as possible so we can start to see if some of our response time is spiking. And so that's why you might want to do stuff like logging out max response time to see like what's going on there. That's also would be a really nice connection point for New Relic. We're running out of time, so I'm probably not going to show this dashboard, but connecting to New Relic and seeing like, hey, what's the 90th percentile response is a good way to like get a sense of like, hey, is this spiking during this load test?
Yeah.
Actually, you want to come back next week as well?
Yeah, I'll come back.
Do like a part 2? Because
not next week. I'm going on vacation. I'll come back in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
but what's happening next
we're
week?
trying to get. We're trying to get you and our colleague Mustafa on the same call because he's really interested in this stuff. But you're taking vacations at opposite times. You're like alternating.
But let's get synced up. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter and let's talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Can you? Well, before we close, I wanted you to get to the to the Animal Crossing metaphor that I heard you talk about, because I love it. You're talking about observability, and I'm a huge Animal Crossing fan. Like, I have more than 1,000 hours logged on one Switch, one account, and I was watching this talk that you did, and you were talking about how in Animal Crossing you might think initially like, yeah, I'm going to have all of the fruits and put the orchards and like space it out really efficiently so you get the most trees in a plot of land. And then, and if you haven't done, I mean, probably anyone who's played Animal Crossing has done this. If you actually do that, you realize, oh, I don't actually see anything. So it's not actually that efficient if you don't know where the fruit is dropping.
Yes. I love this. Yeah. No, I completely forgotten about this. I thought I'd pitch that for this time, and I was like, did I say I was going to say something more about Animal Crossing? Oh no. But yeah, no, I have like the example where like, yeah, if you like grid, if you do like a 2x2 grid, you cannot see yourself at all in Animal Crossing. But yeah, I planning out like what actually is going to be like. Observability architecture is this somewhat controversial topic, right? Because you maybe should just build your architecture to perform as well as possible. And I also think that like, I actually have a piece about this I think is coming out next week, where I do believe that you're going to see some backlash against the microservice architecture, where people are going to say like, hey, I just like having this like large blob of code, right? That is my monolithic code. And one of the reasons is going to be like, hey, I can get like a stack trace on this that gives me everything that's going on, right? What user am I on? What product are they buying? What's that product shipping time? What is the shipping times cost rate, right? Like everything can come out in a single session, which if you're running your microservice architecture securely, you're not able to do. So, you're trying to make these complicated things like distributed traces to get some sense of what's going on. So, this is a question about, should you build your architecture to be more observable and be more easy to understand? And so while microservices are more testable, they're not necessarily more observable. And so that's kind of an open question. I think that the idea, if you talk to somebody who's really been around for a long time, somebody who's been coding for 25 years or something, they'll tell you, no architecture is inherently superior, right? No way of organizing your services, is a win on every single front. And I think most of the changes we see to architecture really are human-centric. So it may not be that you want to redo your architecture so that it's easier to like comprehend, but I think it is true to say, hey, our teams are structured like this, And one of the reasons you move away from monolithic code is you say, actually, it turned out that just these two people really understood this whole system, and they were kind of jerks. And they would always leave dirty coffee cups. And no one could tell them that they had to start cleaning up the coffee cups. It's like, they're the only people who understand the system, right? And they got tired and they became more of a jerk and couldn't do anything. And we tried to train. And so, the real reason for like microservice migration is actually a reflection of that, is to say, hey, if this team of 3 people can come in and in a couple weeks deliver some products and services, and they're able to understand at least just the microservices that they touch and not the whole system to be able to contribute, that's actually a lot better than having somebody who comes on and they're like a beginner for 7.5 months where they're just trying to start to understand the system. And then, of course, the dreaded situation where not that you have people who understand the system who are jerks and kind of unpleasant to work with, but that they left, right? And that now you actually have a system that everybody works on all day, but nobody understands. And so this is the thing that we're afraid of. And that's much more a reflection of just the human realities of running a tech company under late capitalism than, oh, this is technically better, this has a superior seek time, or it has a better algorithmic nature. It's just much more about the humans who actually run that code.
Definitely.
And so yeah, like load testing is in part is like a pure computer science, recognition of, hey, here's what we want to see. But it's also just a human way of communicating through, like at a specific time, like what is going on. And I think most of us have a human need to do it too, right? That we need to do load testing because the times when this is happening for our users are very scary and unpleasant for us. So it's better to know about these things ahead of time, whether or not that, we might be able to get the same data if our actual live users experience the problem, but it's just stressful. It's happening at a time that's not convenient for us. And then also, I don't know, maybe a few users suffer, but who cares about that?
It's actually funny that you mentioned the anticipated backlash for microservices, because I'm really with you on that one. It's starting to. I've started to amass a couple of years in the industry now, and I remember when I first started 10-15 years ago that all the talk was about service-oriented architecture and putting in enterprise service buses and things like that, which is kind of what serverless and microservices are doing today, but with a slightly different twist. And we all backlashed against that and just went back to monoliths for many years prior to serverless and microservices becoming a thing. So I would definitely expect this to go in waves, where we split up all our code into small microservices, and then we just put them back into a monolith, and then we split them apart again. And
I mean, the one that really stands out to me, and this is kind of a classic, and it's been interesting to like link this. I was trying to write an article on Kubernetes, and I had to like both link people to some literature and also like try to like step them through it, because when we just look at like the big successes, we often get a little bit off track, right? I know we're going over, but just hear me out, then I'll see myself out.
That's okay.
But we talk about these big successes, like chaos engineering as an example, where it's like, oh boy, Netflix does this chaos engineering and it's great. Well, you're not Netflix, and I don't know what to tell you, but you never will be. So but looking at these things that are big successes can often really get us off base. There's this article that I love to pass around, which is a Medium article from Tinder Engineering, that says, here's how we, adopted Kubernetes. And it goes through the whole path, but the paragraph at the end that stands out to me, stands out to a lot of other people who read it, said, it cost us 2 years and $500,000. But now, when you go to deploy, your code out to a container, instead of taking a minute and a half, it takes like 15 seconds. 2 years and $500,000.
I'm going to put the
link. 2 years and $500,000. 2 years and $500,000, and that's $500,000 in cash. That's not $500,000 in engineering time, right? Which is clearly significant and was increases that cost by 2 or 3 times, right? And they don't post it as we fucked up. Right. And I don't think it necessarily was a disaster, but I just think, if we sort of put on the green eye shade and just say, what is the cost of this thing? I think we would say, if all you're able to point to is slightly faster deploy times, and admittedly, faster deploy times can be major, but this is not like a Formula One pit stop, right? Where shaving off 15 seconds means millions of dollars in results at the end, right? Where it just, it was clear that yes, this had been successful. Yes, it had brought some other benefits, but it just wasn't obvious what the huge benefit of this was, and the costs were really, really big. And so we need to pay attention to those too, because then we get into backlash territory. And I think the big one is Kubernetes. So we're going to see that. It's like very, very expensive tool, and sometimes a little hard to point to the benefits. Okay, that's been my time. I'm going to end on that bummer note. Check out Bit Project, Serverless Day Student Edition. We will have the CFP. I think the CFP that's an actual URL, so I'll send that to you after this.
Sure.
Awesome.
Can you stick around on the call before you leave? We'll close it though.
Yeah, so great to have you here. This has been
thanks for having me.
Really interesting. It's always good to see someone completely new to the tool, try it out, and work out the things.
It's pretty neat to be able to say, hey, I was able to send 280 simultaneous requests from my laptop, or not simultaneously in 30 seconds. Like, that's really good stuff.
So we'll definitely gonna try to schedule you in for another time because
we gotta meet with your pal. That'll be great.
Yeah, we have so much more to talk about. This was really just scratching the surface. So thank you for being here, and thanks to all of you who have been watching the stream. And see you again next week.
Bye.